The first films were shot as one long take with a single camera, but it wasn't long before filmmakers began to play with piecing together different segments of film to create longer visual experiences made of multiple shots. In joining pieces of developed celluloid together by literally cutting film and gluing strips together, filmmakers could arrange shots in a sequence that spectators could in turn interpret as a series of related moments and spaces. Combinations of shots were thoughtfully connected to convey ideas about time and space to construct continuity. Each shot in a sequence, which we now more often call a scene, informed the next while also being connected to the one that came before. What we now take for granted as readily understandable relationships between shots after almost 150 years of film practice is the result of years of early experimentation in how individual shots may or may not work together. Take, for example, this early film. Does this assembly of shots tell a clear story, or does it leave us somewhat puzzled as to who is doing what and where and why? What's going on here? It's hard to say exactly what the story is in this sequence or who these characters are because this combination of shots doesn't result in logical, sequential meaning. Through trial and error, filmmakers eventually developed a refined system of editing that supported cause and effect meaning making. We are now so used to how shots can relate to one another that we usually don't have to think about it. In a way, we have become fluent in a visual language with a set of grammatical rules to which we are accustomed. But in fact, there's no reason we should know why this shot is connected to this shot. Why do we assume that they have anything to do with one another or even exist in the same place and time, or even story? We call the combination and ordering of shots editing, yet another process of making deliberate and careful choices in filmmaking. In contemporary film and television, it is not uncommon for a single sequence or scene to contain several hundred shots or takes broken up and reordered by what we call cuts. And yet, it's often hard to see the cut that distinguishes one shot from the next, and for good reason. Just as techniques have developed over time to make the presence of the camera invisible to spectators, film editors have also created techniques to make the cut between shots as imperceptible or unobtrusive as possible. So the first thing we need to do to start to understand how editing works, to create yet another layer of meaning, is to start seeing the cuts. In order to see editing, it helps to embody the cut in a physical and auditory way. So if you can, let's feel and hear the connection between shots by clapping our hands. We will practice with two scenes. The first is a fight scene from Kurosawa Akira's 1950 film Rashomon. As you watch it, pay attention to the cuts between shots and clap. Seriously. So here we go in 3, 2, 1. Clap when you see the cuts. Wait, were you actually clapping? It might seem silly or you might forget because the takes are long, but I want you to pay attention and get the feel of it. How about if we do it together? Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Alright, the next sequence is from Ninagawa Mika's 2019 film Daina. It is also an action scene involving a duel with blades, but if you do the work to focus on clapping, it should feel and subsequently sound different. So here we go again in 3, 2, 1. In comparing the two, you might have picked up on one of the attributes editing brings to an individual scene or an overall film, a feeling of pacing derived from timing and rhythm. As you may have noticed, a larger number of cuts and shorter shots in a scene results in a faster feeling pace, as we experienced in Daina. Conversely, fewer cuts and shots in a scene feel slower, like in Rashomon, even though there is constant movement within the frame in both cases. By the numbers, there are 44 shots in the 1 minute 39-second sequence from Daina, and only 14 shots in the 2 minute 14-second sequence from Rashomon. Varying shot lengths lends the scene a rhythm that can influence our emotional response. Several short shots together might make us feel suddenly excited and get our hearts beating faster, whereas longer shots might create a sense of tension or heightened drama. Or, because we are used to seeing a lot of rapid shots in contemporary media, maybe you were bored. Whatever your emotional response, in both, the tempo picked up in the fight to accentuate danger and drama, but then slowed to dramatic effect, albeit with quite different symbolic resonances and for different audiences set almost 60 years apart. That also tells us something significant about how editing practices have changed over time. In addition to pacing, editing also contributes to the work of meaning-making, just like choices about the mise-en-scène and cinematography. But unlike mise-en-scène and cinematography, where meaning is created within the shot, the art of editing can create meaning between shots. Let's consider this next sequence. In truth, this is a series of shots taken from different scenes in Tanarayuki's 2008 film 100,000 yen to Nigamushi Onna, or Million Yen Girl. We had no story in mind when we put these shots together, but nevertheless, perhaps you found your brain working to make some kind of sense in the sequence. Maybe you even made a short story out of it. Our brains seemingly can't help but try to make connections between separate images in a sequence. We fill in the gap between the images ourselves to create logical and meaningful connections, narrative timelines, story world spaces, and quite personal interpretations. As you can imagine, the potential for our brains to find meaning between shots offers filmmakers tremendous opportunities for subtext and symbolism. To explore this further, in Part 2, we'll look at the most common editing techniques that help build ideas of time, space, and meaning from one shot to the next.